Do you like Star Wars? Do you wish you could play Star Wars Unlimited, but you're only a solo little player? Well, do I have a video for you. Hello everybody and welcome to the Boardgaymergirl channel. If you're new here, my name is Natalie and I like to talk about all things board games, but from a primarily solo perspective. Today we are doing something a little differently as we're going to be exploring two of the more popular trading card games that came out over the last couple of years. Recently, I did Star Wars Unlimited, a booster box opening series in my shorts, but we're also going to look at Disney Lorcana. And I am comparing these two because where you usually start is with their starter boxes. This kind of sets up your understanding of how these two different trading card games share the same formula of most trading card games, but also help to teach new gamers to the genre of trading card games who may never have played a trading card game before. But they do different things that set up how some products have a solo and co-op mode product line, and some don't, but very much could have. Plus, I found some little secrets that you'll want to stay around for later on in the video. But without further ado, let's get into this comparison. So for both of these intro boxes, you're playing a deck building game, which is pretty much a 1v1 deck building game where you're trying to get to a certain point before your opponent does. Most of the cards in both of these sets share similar anatomy in the sense that you'll have an area where it depicts the cost of the card, and the cost is how you'll be playing that card onto the board. And then you'll have different colors, which are kind of their card suits. These are important more so for deck building purposes. And each card will also have a strength number and a defense number. They're given different words in both of these types of TCGs, but the referencing is similar in that sense. You'll also obviously have art. You'll have some keywords, which are also important to note for different combos and effects of cards that you'll be playing, as well as a section typically on the bottom of the card that may explain different actions or uses for that card once it's played. The ways in which they differ is how the game structure itself has been created for either of the products. So first, I'll get into Lorcana, which is a Disney-themed character animated fun times situation. And in that game, the cards will also depict a different kind of 4-star value in the area below the card that gives you the actions and information on how the card is played. That is also the lore that the card can produce. During the game, you can also use these cards to quest, and that is the main way to getting to the end of the game, as the goal of the game is to race your opponent to getting 20 lore points before the other one does. And in a way, this kind of works into the theme as animated Disney childhood characters battling it out doesn't necessarily sound like the vibe. So that theme kind of runs through how this game is played. You'll still be having characters that are fighting other characters in your opponent's area with your strength and defense, but the lore is the main way to win the game, and that is pretty much what you're fighting towards to get. Now, when you're playing a trading card game, you'll typically have to pay for cards. In this game, how you'll be doing that is there are some cards in your hand that you can play for ink. And ink is kind of your money of the game or your resource. You'll be playing these cards down in front of you face down, and you'll be tapping them in order to show when you're using them to pay for cards that you'll be playing down. In the Lorcana game, there's only one arena, you do not have a leader, you do not have a base, and that is how it differs from Star Wars Unlimited. So in Star Wars Unlimited, you're still using cards to place down, but you don't have restrictions as to which cards you can place down in your area as a resource to pay for cards later. But you do have two separate arenas that you'll be putting cards down to. This is where the indication of keywords at the top of the card is important to note, because you'll have some ground units that only fight other ground units in your opponent's arena. And you'll also be deploying space units, and space units can fight other space units. Space and ground units never mix. The only time they can mix is when they're fighting each opponent's base. And that is how you win Star Wars Unlimited. Every player has a base that's typically starting between 20 to 30 health points, and the first player to knock down their opponent's base to 0 wins the game. The other difference in the Star Wars Unlimited trading card game is that every player has a leader. And this is kind of, if you're familiar with Magic the Gathering, in the commander mode, you'll have a main card that you kind of build your deck around. And that is how a leader functions in the Star Wars Unlimited intro battle Hoth box. That is a long thing to say. In the intro box, your leaders are Leia Organa and Darth Vader, and you'll be able to utilize them for actions throughout the game, but at one point they'll have different reactions to when you hit a certain point. You can take an epic action, and that epic action turns that leader card to a actual unit that you can place in one of your ground area units. And they can fight and typically have bigger actions that will do a lot worse or better for whatever side of the table you're on. And that's basically the differences between the two boxes and the trading card games themselves. But the main thing that differentiates them, that I think leads one to be more successful to have done a solo and co-op mode, is that the way that they teach it and the way that they framed their starter boxes lets people expand into that TCG, or kind of gives them a glass ceiling kind of feeling where it's a self-contained product where you can't see where you're going next. And that is because the Lorcana box teaches players how you're going to deck build outside of this box, so that you have the resources and tools built within the gateway game so that players can go out and get their booster boxes and all that jazz. With the Star Wars Unlimited box, it will only teach you the game with the cards in the box and doesn't give you any kind of rules or indications as to how those different colored cards structure into how this game creates different decks that you can do on your own, so that you can play multiple decks over time while collecting all those booster boxes, like the one that I opened for 7 or 8 days. And now I have tons of cards and I can totally make a deck. But I do not have the tools that I need to create a deck just from the starter box. And I think those two structures have kind of also been the difference in structured ability to bring new players into their games, and also the setup or line of products that Lorcana has done that Star Wars Unlimited hasn't officially done yet, but should. And those products include the Lorcana Illumineers Quest boxes. And I do have the Jafar one and the Ursula one. And this is how I went with Lorcana instead of Star Wars Unlimited. And that's because the product line already opened me up to how to go further into the trading card game Lorcana outside of the main box, but also made sure to make different products that give you a co-op and a solo mode. Now, part of this can probably be because of the theme that I thought at first, as the structure of these Illumineers quests is that you'll be given a deck. Typically, they come with 1 or 2 decks inside the box themselves, similar to the Gateway box that Lorcana has given out, but you'll be both going against a single villain with a particular deck that they have that comes with different modes of difficulty for you to try to defeat the villain and get to 20 lore points before they do. And it's challenging, especially the Ursula box, but they've been continuing to make these product lines so that there is a way that you can play the trading card game solo. And while Ravensburger has made these official solo and co-op mode boxes available, there is no solo mode that is official from Fantasy Flight for Star Wars Unlimited, But that does not mean that there is not a solo mode out there. As is the case with a lot of multiplayer popular games, some solo fan out there is very nice and creates a solo mode for us all to enjoy. And Star Wars Unlimited is the latest one to find a fan-made solo mode that is very built out. And I will link in the description the website and the video that this creator made showing an example of how they play through their solo mode. And I would say their name, but I'm nervous to mispronounce, so I can't really find their name specifically written out somewhere, but I digress. The solo mode is one where it functions similarly to the Lorcana Illumineers quests, where I think at this current moment they have 4 different Atoma type of solo decks where you're fighting against something well-known bad person in the Star Wars universe, and you can take any of your decks and play solo or co-op against this foe or this deck. And the parameters, I think, are still similar to the regular game, but there are print and play files for the rules and different cards that you'll need for the specific solo deck that you want to go against. I haven't gone and tried this myself yet, but I am looking forward to it now that I have a bunch of cards to create a deck for, and at some point print out those files. But making a solo mode that is now available to the public, it is unofficial, but you can support them with their Patreon that is also on their SWUchallenges.com webpage. Now, while I got into that, there is an official and an unofficial solo mode. But one of the biggest questions that I've had as going through both of these trading cards games is the bigger question as to how Fantasy Flight games did not have a solo approach built out yet, given that they kind of created living card games. And living card games is kind of what really brought me into the solo gaming hobby specifically, as deck building was one of the easier ways that I found you could get into solo gaming. And I started with the Legendary series, but then I found the holy trinity of living card games, all from Fantasy Flight Games. This includes Marvel Champions, Lord of the Rings, the living card game, and Arkham Horror, the card game. All 3 you can play solo or co-op, and you're either working through a story for a similar purpose, or battling a certain baddie, or going through a different scenario and trying to beat whatever the objective is of either of those scenarios. And knowing that they have that, I am just puzzled how they haven't gone and done a Star Wars Unlimited solo or co-op mode. But maybe this will inspire them and maybe bring 2 things together, as other creators have done so with popular fan-made solo modes, like Root and Great Western Trail before them. Maybe Star Wars Unlimited can do a collaboration with the already created fan-made solo mode. Anyways, that's kind of the question I'll leave this one on. If you have any comments or questions, or have any experience with the fan-made solo Star Wars Unlimited, or even your experiences with the Lorcana solo mode, let me know in the comments below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Goodbye!